Part 2 of So This Is Love, a Twisted Tale series by Elizabeth Lim. Chapter 6. The sound of Bruno barking loudly woke Cinderella from her dreams. She started to rise, but the morning's bright light made her pinch her eyes tight. The sun was usually never this harsh in her room. "Stop following me," someone cried in the distance, sounding more distressed than irritated. Strange, thought Cinderella blearily. That doesn't sound like Anastasia or Drusilla. No, I can't go that way. I'm going to be late for work if I... Stop chewing on my skirt! Stop that! Certain she was still dreaming, Cinderella covered her eye with her arm, cherishing every minute of sleep before she had to get up and prepare breakfast for her stepsisters again. As she stifled a yawn and stretched, her knuckles brushed against hard gravel instead of the stiff cotton over her mattress. With a jolt, Cinderella sat up and tried to make sense of her surroundings. The sun still glared at her. All she could see was the sky, bright and cloudless, an ocean of seamless blue. Everything else was blurred, freckled by dancing white sunspots. "Bruno?" she called out. "Where had he gone?" She raised her tone in anxious note. "Bruno!" Behind her, someone let out a gasp. "Oh my, miss? Miss, are you all right?" Cinderella perked up, recognizing the voice of the young woman she had heard earlier. Bruno appeared from behind the girl's skirts and scampered to Cinderella's side. "Oh, what a relief! He's yours!" "I worried he was a stray, he was barking so much." The girl knelt beside her, setting down a basket brimming with neat piles of fabric, spools of thread, and a pair of scissors. A seamstress, Cinderella deduced. "He grabbed onto my skirt and wouldn't let me go until I followed him. Now I see why. Clever dog." The seamstress viewed Cinderella, her hazel eyes flaring with concern. "Are you all right? Can you stand?" Cinderella's back ached from sleeping on the street, and her head still throbbed from hitting the side of Mr. Lever's carriage, but already the pain was subsiding. "Yes, I'm fine." The young seamstress lent Cinderella her arm, yanking her to her feet. "You're lucky I was running late to work. Otherwise, who knows who might have found you." "Thank you," said Cinderella, staggering back. The seamstress's eyebrows suddenly flew up, and she pulled Cinderella off the street and onto the sidewalk before a carriage rushed past, its wheels spinning alarmingly fast. "I guess I spoke too fast," Cinderella said, catching her breath. "I didn't even know I was on the street." "You need to be more aware of your surroundings," the seamstress chided. "You could have gotten trampled." She furrowed her brow. "What's a girl like you doing sleeping out here anyway?" "It's a long story," replied Cinderella, managing a smile. "Thank you again for your help. I don't want to keep you if you have somewhere to go." The seamstress's expression softened, and she glanced at the clock over one of the shops. "Guess I'm going to be late no matter what. Besides, you look like you need my help more than some silly lords and ladies." She pushed a lock of auburn hair out of her face. She was tall, and a dimple emerged on the right corner of her mouth when she smiled. "I get nervous when I'm running late, so I'm sorry if I was rude. Let's start again. I'm Louisa." "Cinderella." "Cinderella?" Louisa's eyebrow arched. "That's a name I've never heard before, and I know about most of the girls in town." Cinderella pursed her lips and twisted the ends of her apron, unsure how to explain she'd been her stepmother's servant for years and practically a prisoner in her own home. "I don't go out much," was all she said. "I was beginning to wonder," said Louisa dryly. "You don't seem to even know where you are." Her hand jumped to her mouth. "That came out ruder than I meant it to. Mother always says I need to keep my thoughts to myself. Aunt Armina does too, but it's hard when my thoughts are so loud." Louisa made a face. "How'd you get a name like Cinderella?" "My birth name is Ella, after my mother, Gabrielle, but no one's called me that for years." "I like Cinderella," Louisa declared. "I don't understand the cinder in front of Ella, but it's different, I'll say." "I used to curl up by the fire in the kitchen waiting for my papa to come home from his travels," Cinderella explained. "Sometimes I'd fall asleep and have soot all over my clothes. One time he cleaned it off, and ever since he's called me Cinderella." Cinderella had been her father's term of endearment for her. Only after he died did her stepmother and stepsisters use her name as a way of mocking her. Is he traveling now? Louisa asked. He must be worried about you. No, Cinderella's voice faltered. He's not traveling. He passed away years ago. Louisa smacked her mouth. I'm sorry. There I go, saying the wrong things again. It was a long time ago. You wouldn't have known. Do you at least have a place to go? Any home or family? Cinderella was silent. What could she say? That she'd been trapped in her father's house for the past decade, forced to wait on a cruel stepmother and two stepsisters? Even if she wanted to go back to her father's house, she couldn't. Not after what happened the night before. No, she said quietly. Don't worry about me. You should get to work. I've kept you long enough. Louisa eyed her face, gesturing at her forehead. You have a bruise. It's nothing, just from last night. I hit my head on a carriage. A carriage? Louisa repeated, alarmed. What were you? In the background, a clock chimed, cutting over Louisa's question. She shot up, picking up her basket so quickly it swung in her arms. Heavens, it's 7 o'clock already. They were the same bells from the palace watchtower that used to rouse Cinderella every morning. Old Killjoy, she used to call the clock. But for the first time, she wasn't hearing it ring in bed. She wasn't in her tiny room in the attic, watching the city come alive. She was in the heart of Valours. Something about that realization made a lump rise in her throat. She'd missed being in the city. She just hadn't expected this, being forced out of her home and sold by Lady Tremaine, to be the way she found herself there. Go on, Cinderella said over the clock's chimes. She inhaled a shaky breath. I'll be fine. I have Bruno with me. I hate to leave you, but I really... Oh, no, Louisa suddenly exclaimed. Bruno was gnawing at a scrap of fabric from her dress. My uniform! Bruno, Cinderella scolded. She tisked at him and then turned to Louisa. It's torn in the back. I'm so sorry, but I can help you mend it if you have a needle and thread handy. It's all right, Louisa said, already trying to access the damage. He was trying to get my attention so I could find you. I can manage. I wasn't raised a dressmaker's daughter for nothing. Even a dressmaker's daughter would have to have eyes in the back of her head to mend that rip, Cinderella pointed out, laughing. Can you even see it behind you? Louisa craned her neck to look. You're right. The seamstress made a worried face. I'll be sent home if I show up at the palace with a tear in my skirt. The comment startled Cinderella. The palace? I work there. Cinderella's heart skipped a beat. Quickly looking down at Louisa's skirt to hide her emotions, she took the needle and thread her new friend offered. You must be very skilled. Ha! Louisa held up her skirt so Cinderella could begin working. My mother owns a small dress shop in the garment district. I've been sewing for her since I was little, but I'm still the slowest in the palace. Cinderella didn't speak until she was nearly done mending Louisa's skirt. Is this good enough? Oh, that's wonderful. You're a fine seamstress yourself. I used to sew for my stepsisters, Cinderella almost said, but she stopped herself. The memory of Mr. Lever and her stepmother trying to indenture her as a servant were too fresh. Best not to speak of them, not only because she was worried they might find her, but also because her stepmother's cruelty still stung. Very neat, Louisa said admiringly. Then she hesitated before observing. Your hands are shaking. Are they? Cinderella stuffed them into her pockets. Just a little chilly, I guess. Goodness, you don't even have a coat? Louisa frowned, then took one of the sheaves of cloth from her basket and wrapped it around Cinderella's shoulders. You don't have to tell me how you ended up on the street, but tell me the truth. You don't have anywhere to go, do you? Slowly, Cinderella shook her head. Hunger sharpened her gut, and her stomach growled before she could stop it. I knew it! Why don't you come with me? I'll make sure the cooks get you a nice bowl of soup. I think it's onion soup today, and that's one of my favorites. Louisa paused, glancing at Cinderella's dirty dress and the apron over it. Maybe we can even find a job for you. In the palace? No, the tanneries. Of course the palace, Louisa giggled at Cinderella's wide eyes, misreading her startled expression for one of awe. It's less grand when you're the one cleaning it. But given the urgent search for the missing princess, no one in the palace is paying close attention to us servants. I'm sure I could convince Ermina, to give you a few days' work at the very least." Cinderella swallowed. The palace was where Prince Charles lived, but she wasn't a fool. She knew that the chances of running into him would be slim, and yet, maybe, just maybe, if he saw her again, even dressed as a member of the palace staff, he might recognize her. She shook the possibility away. What am I thinking, clinging to some silly fantasy about a silly prince I've only met once? She inhaled, trying to reason away her feelings for the prince. A job in the palace is more than I could have ever hoped for. It's work that will pay, and it's a life away from my stepmother. It's the new start I've been waiting for. "Well," Louisa asked, "what do you say?" Cinderella almost agreed, but then she remembered Bruno, who was staring morosely at the two girls. What about Bruno? Louisa eyed the bloodhound nervously. "I can try to sneak him into the servants' quarters, but we'll have to keep him hidden. Aunt Ermina is not fond of animals." So it was settled, and Cinderella followed her new friend Louisa to the last place she thought she would see again, the palace. Chapter 7. Announcing the Crown Prince Charles Maximilian Alexander, son of King George Louis Philip III, noble prince and beloved heir to the throne of Urles. Charles usually would have waited for the royal crier to finish declaring his entrance, but this morning he barely even heard the man. He stormed into the royal dining chamber. Inside he found his father calmly breaking his fast with a plate of almond cakes, freshly baked pastries, and raspberry jam, and the Grand Duke reading aloud from a scroll. "That is 123 households, sire," declared Ferdinand. "None of the maidens came close to fitting the slipper. At this rate, I suspect the search is futile, and that the missing young lady will not be found." The Duke lowered his scroll, noticing Charles. "Why, good morning, your Highness." A flurry of servants trailed Charles. Any other day he might have felt horrible about causing a ruckus with his unexpected appearance at breakfast, but not today. King George brightened at the sight of his son. "Good morning, my boy. Sit down, sit down." "Good morning, father," replied the prince, managing an awkward bow. A servant hastily pulled out a chair for him, but he did not sit. Instead, he directed his gaze to the Grand Duke. "I thought I made it clear that I wish to be present for every report regarding the glass slipper." "It is 7:30, your Highness," replied the Duke smoothly. "We waited as long as we could." As always, Ferdinand had an excuse for everything, but Charles detected an undertone of fatigue behind his usual unflappable charm. Dark circles hooded the Grand Duke's eyes, and his uniform, typically pressed to perfection, was wrinkled at the hems. Evidently he had not slept well. Charles had not either. In truth, he hadn't slept at all. How could he? The last thing he wanted was for Ferdinand to find his intended bride. Charles had wanted to search for her himself. Unfortunately, his father had insisted on appointing the Grand Duke for the job. "Ferdinand is the most capable man in the kingdom. He will find her," he'd said. Her. Charles hated that he didn't even know her name. Everyone was calling her the mysterious maiden, or the runaway princess, or simply the girl with the glass slippers. To him, she'd been more. The girl who had captured his heart, his true love perhaps. Until he saw her again, he couldn't be sure. "Did you find her?" he asked. "I regret not, your Highness." Ferdinand blew his nose into his handkerchief and waved a hand at the servants to disperse. Charles knew the gesture. These are matters of state meant only for the sovereign's ears, which meant there were bad news to come. The Duke straightened as the staff retreated outside. "I've searched everywhere. The maiden has vanished." It was as Charles had feared. "Continue your report, please." "As you wish, your Highness." Ferdinand returned to reading his scroll. "From dawn to dusk, 123 households were searched yesterday in first and second precincts of Valois. None were residents to the maiden with the glass slipper. I regret I must conclude my search—" "After only one day?" interrupted Charles. "Yes, I made a thorough inquiry of the first and second precincts." There are 9 precincts in Valours and more than 123 households. There are only 123 noble households. I thought I'd made myself clear, Charles said through his teeth. Every household, noble and common. The Duke frowned. But, Your Highness, if the girl's a commoner, every eligible maiden was invited to attend, wasn't she? Charles said, quoting the invitation. Then the girl could be anyone, a countess, a farmer, a scullery maid. Search everyone. I am afraid that will be impossible, said the Duke. There is a council meeting this morning regarding urgent matters of state. My presence is not to be missed. Sire, don't you agree? Said the king, who was more focused on his plate of eggs than on the conversation at hand. Ah, yes, urgent matters of state. Everyone's been searched. He seems distracted this morning, Charles thought, observing his father. No, I said to search everyone. If I could go myself to look for her. That's out of the question, interrupted Ferdinand. Your Highness, it would be neither appropriate nor safe for you to venture into Valours on such a quest. I was addressing my father, not you. Ferdinand's right, said the king, finally snapping to attention. A prince does not go out on a manhunt, knocking on doors in search of runaway princesses. It's not a... Besides, your Aunt Genevieve arrived this morning and expects you to accompany her to lunch. The prince started. The name was one he hadn't heard in years. Aunt Genevieve is here? That's what I said, isn't it? A muscle twitched in Charles' jaw. Now he understood why his father looked so preoccupied. His aunt, the Duchess of Orléans, hadn't visited in nearly a decade. In fact, the last time she'd been there, she'd sworn never to return to the palace. She and his father famously did not get along, and Charles didn't understand why, given he thought the world of her. Where is she now? Charles asked. Still sleeping, I should hope. King George shoveled the rest of his pastry into his mouth. He began to cough violently as he chewed, the color draining from his face. Oh dear, exclaimed the Grand Duke, springing to action. He tapped the king's back with his scroll, but it only made the coughing worse. By now the king's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. Charles rounded on his father, hoisting him out of his chair and pumping his chest as the Duke rang the nearest bell. Come help His Majesty, he's choking. Just as the servants began clamoring inside, the pastry shot out of his mouth onto the table. Breathe, father, breathe. The king tugged at his collar, recovering his breath. Sire, said the Duke, that's the 3rd time this week. Are you? King George grunted, a signal for the Duke to be quiet. Nothing's the matter with me. Drank my tea too fast, that's all. Pass me the sugar, will you? Father, are you sure that's a good idea? You just choked. The Duke complied before Charles could argue further, scooping a heaping spoonful for the king. George leaned back in his chair, a contented smile cheering his expression. Perhaps you ought to sit out on meeting with the council this morning, Your Majesty, Ferdinand said, once Charles's father took another long sip. The Duke had taken the tone Charles detested most. It was far too nice, far too suggestive that he was angling for something. But what? Sit out the meeting? Yes, the physician said. The king shot the Grand Duke a deadly look. I can handle a council meeting, thank you very much. But sire, Charles frowned at both of them. What did the physician say, father? Only that all this party-throwing business is too much for a young man like me. King George leaned back in his chair, exhaling, then letting out a chortle. What does he know? The Grand Duke was watching them, a corner of his mouth lifted. Charles didn't like the look. Shouldn't you be resuming your search in Valours? He asked Ferdinand. If your highness insists, I will certainly continue my search, but only after the council meeting. There are important laws being discussed this morning, and His Majesty greatly values my opinion. Charles frowned. Important laws? Father, I could help you. No, you must not be late for your luncheon with the Duchess, interrupted Ferdinand smoothly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must prepare my statement for today's council. He rolled up his scroll, tucking it under his arm, saluted the king, and bowed. Then the door closed, leaving the prince alone with his father. Charles opened his mouth to express his doubts about the Grand Duke, but his father spoke first. Why the frown, my boy? Don't be so hard on Ferdinand. He's doing the best he can. I don't trust him. Why not? He's doing you a great favor searching the kingdom for the girl with the glass slipper. Charles tried not to cringe. The last person he wanted to be indebted to was the Duke. Curious maiden, this young lady of yours, the king laughed heartily. I've heard of many things in my time, but not glass slippers. Cheer up, my boy. We'll find her. How far could she have gotten on glass? And only one shoe. Slowly, Charles relaxed, and he couldn't help smiling. Hearing his father laugh reminded him of the man he'd missed while he was away at the Royal University. The vibrant and energetic father who bounced him on his knee when he was a boy and spent every precious free moment he had with his son. Then the king's shoulders sagged, and his laugh became a dry, hacking cough. Panic seized Charles. Father! King George clutched at his chest, pounding on it with his fists. His cough spluttered into a coarse wheeze, and then he forced a laugh. It's nothing, my boy. He waved a croissant at Charles, then picked up his teacup again. Just choked on my good humor. That didn't sound like you were choking. Lord knows I won't have anything to laugh about when Genevieve's around, interjected the king dryly. The last time your aunt smiled, I still had all my hair. He patted his bald scalp. Why else do you think I sent her away? She's no good for my blood pressure, no good for my sleep either. But his father hadn't sent her away. From what Charles remembered, Aunt Genevieve had chosen to leave. He didn't know much more than that. It was always a sore subject with his father, one he had never dared to broach himself. Now, are you going to keep standing there, or are you going to join me for breakfast? Some other time, Charles said. He had a feeling his father was simply trying to change the subject. The king harumphed. Very well, then. Be sure you arrive on time for lunch. The last thing I need is Genevieve haranguing me for not teaching you proper manners. I'll be there. Charles started to leave, then paused in his step, tensing. What is it, my boy? It's a matter of the council, said Charles. I'd like to join your daily meetings with Ferdinand, too. Ah, the king's voice drifted. He coughed into his sleeve. Naturally you will, Charles, in due time. Let us focus on getting you settled back in the palace. I am settled. Then let's wait until Ferdinand finds your girl, and then we'll talk. All right? Best for you to have proper introduction to the council once that is sorted. The king leaned back against his chair-cushioned headboard. You'll be happier, too. Very well, father, the prince bowed. Enjoy your breakfast. On his way out, Charles noticed his father's chamberlain lingering outside the door. Keeping his voice low, the prince said, Sir Chamberlain, would you have the royal physician visit my father again today? The older man blinked, as if surprised by the question. But, befitting the truly trained and skilled servant he was, he quickly hid his confusion and bent his head. Yes, your highness. Thank you, Sir Chamberlain. Feeling slightly better about his father's health, Charles strode on, but he didn't know where he was going. The gardens, perhaps. He had spent almost all of the day before there, trying to retrace the steps he'd taken with her, to see if he could remember anything that might help him find her. He hadn't, but maybe today would be different. It was better than waiting for Ferdinand to come back with news. 3 quarters down, Charles passed the physician hurrying to the king's chamber. That was quick, he murmured. Dr. Costi, are you on your way to see my father? Why, yes, your highness. The physician shuffled backward, and a flash of parchment peeked out from under his arm, stamped with Ferdinand's seal. Curious. What did Ferdinand want with the royal physician? I am concerned about his health. Was he ill much while I was away? His Majesty the King is in excellent health, Dr. Costi replied, a little too brightly. His appetite is vigorous and his energy boundless. I have recommended that he exercise more, perhaps a daily morning walk about the gardens, but His Majesty has been so excited for your Highness's return from the Royal University this month that he has not yet implemented my suggestion. Even still, there is nothing to be concerned about. You are certain? His cough sounded worrisome. It's happened before, the physician assured him. Likely His Majesty is simply growing more sensitive to things like dust. Not unusual for a man his age. That and his high blood pressure is slightly elevated, but it's nothing a good week of rest can't fix. Think nothing of it." "I see," Charles replied. That was what his father had said. "Well, if there's anything you can do—" Dr. Coste stroked his beard. "I know the Grand Duke enjoys visiting His Majesty after the evening council meetings, but I would suggest that your father not take any tea after dinner. A better night's rest should relieve his coughing fits. I'll propose a sleeping draught instead." That eased some of Charles's concern. "Thank you, Dr. Coste. Carry on." Unclenching his fist, the prince headed to the stables. He might not be allowed to leave the palace to help search for the girl of his dreams, but a brisk ride through the royal grounds would help clear his mind, even if just for a few hours. Chapter 8. At precisely 7:30 in the morning, the city of Valoris came alive. One by one, the shopkeepers opened their doors, sweeping the floors and throwing buckets of water into the streets to clean their storefronts. Bright yellow and purple awnings hovered over the tiled roofs, and aromas of bread, oranges, and fish wafted into the crisp air. Carriages darted out of narrow side streets and rumbled onto the roads, and the fountains in the town squares gurgled to life. As Cinderella followed Louisa deeper into the city, she marveled at the scene. Everywhere she looked, there was people. Children clinging to their mothers' hands, young couples on a morning stroll, and elderly women lining up at the market for the day's first pick of fruits and vegetables. Years of loneliness, so deeply carved into Cinderella's heart, were slowly whittled away. This was what she had missed during her years with Lady Tremaine. Going out to the market with the servants, meeting strangers and chatting with other girls her age, wandering the streets of the city with her papa until she got lost, having dreams of what she could do. She allowed herself a moment of hopeful thinking. Maybe she could open a flower shop one day, like the one she just passed, and have her own garden of roses like the ones her mother had grown. "Come on," said Louisa, helping her navigate the growing crowds. "Once we're out of the square, there's a shortcut we can take to the palace." Cinderella's nerves fluttered as she glanced up at the king's residence. It crowned the top of a nearby hill and was so close she could make out the lions embroidered on the tower flags and the pink roses lining the roads up to the main gates. Soon she'd be there again. "Isn't it marvelous?" Louisa asked, catching her staring. "It's even grander inside. You'll see." Cinderella had seen, but she simply nodded. After all, what could she say? That she'd ridden an enchanted pumpkin-turned coach up the winding starlit path just 2 nights ago? From her window it had been like a painting out of a fairy tale, not an actual place people lived in. She still remembered how intensely her heart had raced, how she listened to the horses' hooves beating against the pavement, steadily bringing her closer to the castle. Even the air there had been sweet, with the scent of lilies and roses and flowers she could not name, of freshly watered bushes, of pebbled stones, of horsehair and gaslight. It had smelled heavenly. The streets of Valoris did not smell heavenly. Smashed oranges, rotten vegetables, and broken carriage wheels splattered with mud littered the roads. While Louisa chattered away, her conversation vacillating between worrying about being late for work and instructing Cinderella on how to behave in the palace, Cinderella focused on avoiding a series of suspiciously colored puddles, piles of horse manure, and broken wine bottles. Before she knew it, she followed Louisa up the hill towards the castle. "If you ever get lost," said Louisa, pointing at the clock tower, the same one that had struck midnight during the ball, "head to the clock tower. The palace is a bona fide maze, and it's the tallest building you'll see from any point. Turn left at the purple tulips and follow the hedges. The servants' quarters are right past the iron gate." "Purple tulips," repeated Cinderella, brushing her fingers across the leafy walls, "down to the iron gate. That's easy enough." At her side, Bruno let out a growl. He spotted a stray cat scampering out of a bush. "That reminds me," added Louisa, "we'll have to keep your dog here for now." She gestured at the hedges, whose branches were loose enough that Bruno could easily crawl inside to hide. "I'll sneak him inside during lunch." As Cinderella nodded, Louisa tilted her head to the side, studying her. "Just a minute. Aunt Romina's a stickler for appearances." Removing a few pins from her own hair, she wrapped Cinderella's ponytail into a neat bun. "There, that'll help a little." She motioned at the gate ahead, guarded by 4 sentries. Hooking her arm under Cinderella's, Louisa whispered, "Don't say anything. Stay a step behind me, smile, and follow my lead." Cinderella's new friends strode up to the guards, greeting them with a winsome smile. "Francis, Theodore, Jules, Jean, good morning." One by one, they returned Louisa's infectious smile. "Mornin', Louisa. Late again?" Louisa raised a finger to her mouth, pretending to shush them. "Hoping Aunt Ermina is too busy to notice I'm a few minutes behind." "You're in luck, as always." "The palace still in an uproar?" Louisa exhaled with relief. "I thought so." "You better hurry before those few minutes become half an hour. It's nearly 8. They parted to let Louisa through, but at the last minute the 4th guard intercepted Cinderella. "Papers, miss?" "She's a new maid," cut in Louisa. "No papers yet." "New maid?" "Yes, for the new princess." At the words, Cinderella flinched, the blood rushing to her head. Luckily, no one was paying attention to her. "Weren't you paying attention to the morning announcement?" Louisa was saying, "about His Royal Highness searching for the love of his life?" The guard narrowed his eyes. "You know we don't listen to the servants' morning announcement, and I don't recall anything about His Grace hiring a new maid." "We're about to have a new princess, aren't we?" Louisa puffed. "Then obviously the palace needs a new maid. Come on, let her in. I'm already late as it is, and you know how our Aunt Ermina is." She clasped her hands together in entreaty. "Go on, hurry, before we change our minds." Once they were out of the guards' earshot, Louisa squeezed Cinderella's hand and let out a little squeal. "See? That wasn't so hard. Now for the tricky part. Aunt Ermina." "Madam Ermina to you." "Is she in charge?" "Yes, of the blooms and looms," Louisa explained breezily. "Blooms and looms?" "That's what we call the quarters for all the maids and all the seamstresses. We change into our uniforms, report to duty, and eat there. Some of the girls even live there, depending on their posts." She gestured left at the fork in the hallway. "That way leads to the cooks and looks wing. Quarters for all the butlers, valets, chefs, and so on." Cinderella chuckled. "Who came up with these names?" "Here." "Who came up with these names?" "I don't know. They were around long before I even got here." Louisa guided her down a long corridor, wallpapered in cream-colored brocade. She was talking so fast now that Cinderella could barely understand her. "But they're not official, remind you. Not like all the names for the rooms upstairs. The Amber Stateroom, the Hall of Westerly Mirrors, the Emerald Lounging Room, the Royal Apartments. Only the servants use blooms and looms and cooks and looks. When you're stationed up there and the nobles start talking about downstairs, this is where they mean." Upstairs, downstairs, it all made sense to Cinderella. Upstairs was where the masters and mistresses lived, like her stepmother's and stepsisters' quarters. Downstairs was the kitchen, the pantry, the chicken coop, the stables, all the places where Cinderella had spent her days working. She may have returned to the palace, but being downstairs here felt just as far away from the prince as her attic. The main chamber came into view. This part of the palace didn't look anything like what Cinderella had seen at the ball. In fact, it reminded her of home. Checkered floors, wooden walls coated with burgundy wallpaper, and silver tables with slim vases of tulips. There was even an impressive line of bronze call bells lining one side of the wall. "Records," Louisa said hurriedly, gesturing at a long piece of paper tacked against the wall, "for keeping track of her chores and hours. Write your name every morning when you come in for breakfast. That is, unless you end up as a personal attendant. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, though." "What do you mean?" "All the royals have regular attendants. Those positions aren't open. But visitors are a different story. They usually bring their own retinue, ladies in waiting, and butlers, and maids, even though it is hospitality for the king to offer his own staff. Father says the tradition was meant to prevent conspiracies back in the old days." She shrugged. "The point is, personal attendants are at their master's beck and call." "I wouldn't mind," said Cinderella. "You have no idea what you're in for," Louisa shuddered. "They say the last time the Duchess was here, she wouldn't drink the palace water, only water brought to her from the streams of Mount Bonclair. Her attendant had to write letters to every lord and velours to get her some. She likes her tea scalding hot and throws it back at you if the temperature is wrong. And once she made her attendant bring a caged lark to wake her in the morning because she said that the girl's voice was too shrill. Lucky for you, we had to draw straws yesterday to see who'd have to serve her. But before Louisa got a chance to finish, a low voice interrupted them. Late again, I see. From the way Louisa instantly straightened, Cinderella deduced the woman who spoken had to be Madame Ermina. Stay here, Louisa whispered, waving Cinderella back into the hallway. Dipping into the shadows, Cinderella pressed her back against the wall and peeked out. Madame Ermina was shorter than she had imagined, given how tall her niece was, but she stood as though she towered over Louisa, her back stiff as an ironing board. Everything about her was precise. Her hair was meticulously arranged into a neat round bun, with not a gray tendril out of place, and her apron was the whitest, most spotless swath of fabric Cinderella had ever seen. Not a woman to be crossed. That's the third time this month, Louisa. Yes, I know. I was up late last night helping my mother, and no excuses. You know the rules. Louisa quieted. I'm sorry, it won't happen again. Don't think because you're my niece you have the privilege of flouting the rules. I warned you last time that... Have a heart, Aunt Ermina, Louisa interrupted. Papa's... Save the speech. I've heard it all before. Your papa's been here ever since you were born, and it's always been your dream to work here with him, Ermina huffed. If it really is your dream, try and be in on time. My ma's shop needs extra help last night. I'll do double my tasks. How can you? You're the slowest seamstress in the entire palace. Yes, but that's because my stitches are the neatest. And your mouth is certainly the rudest, Ermina glared at her. Rules are rules. All I ask is that you be on time, and I will not make an exception for you because we're family. I'm the reason she's late, Cinderella spoke up. Please don't punish her on my behalf. No, Louisa mouthed, trying to wave her away. Get back in the hall, she whispered, but it was too late. Madame Ermina spun to face her. And who are you? Cinderella, ma'am. A deep frown set in Ermina's tight features. There is no Cinderella among my girls. I brought her, Louisa said. We'll be in need of more staff if there's to be a new princess, and she's a decent seamstress. And who are you to judge whether someone is a decent seamstress, Madame Ermina said testily. I make the decisions regarding the household, and we do not need another seamstress. She has no other place to go. I found her on the street. The street? Ermina repeated with horror. You cannot simply bring runaways into the palace. There is a long interview process. Not just anyone is fit to serve His Royal Majesty's household. References must be made and inquired after. Please, begged Cinderella. I have nowhere else to go. I can cook and clean and sew. This is a palace, Madame Ermina sniffed. If we wanted just anyone who could cook, clean, and sew, we would have asked for a wench from the local tavern. Have a heart, Aunt Ermina, repeated Louisa. That's Madam to you, Ermina snapped. Rules are rules. She will have to go. There's absolutely no room, and as for you, Louisa, it's high time I had a word with you. If it weren't for your mother. Before she could finish, a bell clanged behind Madame Ermina, and she stiffened. Cinderella glanced behind her, noticing once again the wall mounted with dozens of bells, all coated with different stripes of color. The one ringing was in the top row, labeled with a stripe of blue paint. All the servants immediately scrambled to form a long straight line in the reception room. Booted steps echoed down the hall, and a tall figure approached. What is this din? Entered a new voice, aristocratic and exasperated. Louisa nudged Cinderella to take a place beside her at the end of the line. Cinderella straightened and bent her head, copying everyone's posture. But she peeked up at the last moment, curious what was going on and who this visitor might be. As soon as the door into the servants' quarters opened, she let out a quiet gasp. It was the Grand Duke. She'd only caught a glimpse of him during the ball and when he'd visited the chateau. His black hair was smoothly combed, a monocle hung on a golden chain from his coat pocket, and his blue epaulets bounced slightly as he walked. He looked tired. His eyes were bloodshot. Mustache was flat and uncombed. "That's the Grand Duke," Louisa whispered, assuming Cinderella didn't know. "He's the king's closest confidant and advisor. Some say he's become the most powerful man in Arules." "Besides the king, of course," Cinderella whispered back, but Louisa didn't get a chance to reply. "Your Grace," blustered Madame Ermina, "I was not expecting you." The Grand Duke surveyed the line of female servants with a curled lip. "Disorder is the precursor of disgrace," he said. "I expected more of you, Madame Ermina. Your girls seem to have forgotten their manners." At once all the young women in the room curtsied. The move did not seem to mollify the Grand Duke, however, for he simply sniffed in disdain. "He's been in a foul mood ever since that mysterious princess vanished from the ball," Louisa whispered. At the mention of the mysterious princess, Cinderella's knees stiffened. "Why?" "The princess left a shoe at the ball, a glass slipper, so I hear. It's all the prince has of her, so he sent the Grand Duke all over Arules to find her." Louisa let out a quiet sigh. "It's so terribly romantic. They say the prince will go to the ends of the earth to find her. All day and night the Duke's been searching, but no luck so far. Can't be long now, though it is odd she hasn't come forth herself. I know I would if I had a chance to marry the prince. I'll bet the Duke's going to start the search again today." "What happens if he doesn't find her?" murmured Cinderella. "The king's fickle." Louisa leaned closer, lowering her voice. "On a good day, the Duke might get away with a rap on his knuckles. But His Majesty's been extra irritable lately, and he's been very keen on the prince finding a bride right away. Says it's a matter of national importance, so who knows?" That was news to Cinderella, though she supposed she shouldn't have been surprised. A ball that invited every eligible maiden to attend could only be intended for one purpose, to find the prince a wife. Was that the only reason he had danced with her, to please his father? She wondered what he had thought of it all. "Ahem," said the Grand Duke loudly, the rebuke aimed at Louisa and Cinderella. Louisa's cheeks burned, and she curtsied lower. Cinderella did the same. "I don't recognize you," said the Duke, pausing in front of Cinderella. "She's a trainee, Your Grace," offered Louisa. "A trainee?" He inclined his chin at Madame Ermina. "Is this the new attendant you hired for the Duchess?" "Oh," Madame Ermina said, startled. "She dismissed the one I sent this morning already?" "Never try to comprehend Genevieve's actions," replied the Duke. "The woman is all madness and no reason, just like her husband. A pity she, too, wasn't banished from court." He turned to Cinderella. "Come along now. You should already be upstairs." "But I haven't even—" "Ah!" The Grand Duke's eyes widened, as if he were seeing her for the first time. He wrinkled his nose at her appearance. "Have we run out of gold? Someone see to it that she gets some proper clothes. I'll never hear the end of I send a servant in rags to Genevieve." "Louisa, come with me," shouted Madame Ermina, pulling Cinderella into a private room. Inside was a wall of identical dressers. "It must be your lucky day, girl." She pulled up one of the drawers and thrust a lavender sash and an apron into Cinderella's arms. "Put this on after you've changed. I hope you've bathed recently. I suppose it doesn't matter, since you won't last long anyhow. Louisa, get this girl an attendant's dress, and don't forget the wig." Cinderella raised an eyebrow. "Wig?" "Come on," Louisa whispered, guiding her to the staff's changing room as Madame Ermina returned to the Grand Duke. "I told you not to say anything," Louisa said softly. "Now you're going to be the Duchess's attendant. Madame Ermina was going to fire you." "Aunt Ermina's family," Louisa explained. "She loves making threats, but she's not as mean-hearted as she sounds, so long as you pretend to be afraid of her." "I've had some practice with that," muttered Cinderella, stifling unpleasant memories of Lady Tremaine. Madame Ermina didn't seem half as bad as her stepmother. "Here," said Louisa, after rummaging through the closet for a rose-colored dress with frills along the cuffs and collar. She scrunched up her face. "I know it's hideous. I didn't design it." Cinderella slipped the new uniform over her head. "What's this for?" she asked, touching the lavender sash. "The color tells us who you're serving. In your case, the Duchess. It'll match her call bell on the wall. Louisa pinned the sash at her side, then spun Cinderella toward the mirror. One last thing. Louisa rifled through the drawers again until she found a wig with white ringlets that looked like they'd seen better days. While Cinderella pinned the wig to her hair, Louisa hastily brushed its ivory curls. It's a little big for your head, but it'll have to do for now. All attendants wear one. Come on, the Duke is waiting. Ah, that's much more tolerable, he said, throwing a cursory glance over Cinderella when she returned. Madame Ermina, this is not to happen again. My time is far too valuable to check on every girl we send to Genevieve. My deepest apologies, Your Grace. See to it that she's prompted directly to the Duchess's chamber. I must be off. Eyes down, girl, muttered Ermina, pushing Cinderella's neck toward the ground. When you're with any person of importance, stay 3 paces behind at all times. Don't speak unless spoken to. Got it? Yes, Cinderella murmured. From behind, the Grand Duke cleared his throat. On second thought, you. He pointed carelessly at Cinderella. Follow me. I'll direct you to the Duchess myself. Keeping her head low, Cinderella tried to focus her gaze on the ground, but her eyes kept drifting up. This was the man who visited the chateau looking for her. All she had to do was ask him to let her try on the glass slipper. Under his arm, the Duke carried a thick scroll loosely bound by a satin ribbon. It looked like a list of addresses, presumably residences that he had to visit today in search of the missing princess, in search of her. Have you found her yet? Cinderella asked, filling the heavy silence between them. Startled from his distraction, the Duke scowled at her. Who knew whether it was because she had dared speak to him without first being given permission, or because she'd brought up an unpleasant topic, but she simply couldn't help asking. Who? Cinderella inhaled, summoning her courage. The girl with the glass slipper. Heavens, no. If I had, the council wouldn't have canceled the meeting this morning, and He stopped, his expression stony as he plodded ahead. Tell him, her heart urged her. Tell him you're the girl who danced with the prince at the ball. Cinderella opened her mouth to try again, but the words came out as a question. Can any girl try on the glass slipper? Every eligible maiden, he said wearily, as if the phrase had been beaten into him. So someone like me? The Duke eyed her sharply. No, you are a servant of the royal household. It would be impossible. Impossible. What will we have next? Commoners serving on the royal council? Stung, Cinderella drew back. More than anything, she wanted to tell him, I am the girl you're looking for. You can call the search off. But she couldn't bring herself to do it. After all, she no longer had her glass slipper to prove it. She could practically hear him laughing at her. A pretty picture, young lady, imagine, a maid, becoming a princess. Then he would dismiss her, and she'd never be able to enter the palace again. What was more, she couldn't forget her fairy godmother's uneasiness when she'd said, My magic is forbidden in Eurylais. Even if the Grand Duke did not let her try the slipper, a man like him was bound to question how she had gotten her beautiful ball gown, her glass shoes, her fine coach, and horses. What if the answer, magic, led to trouble for Lenora? That wouldn't do. She wouldn't risk it. She'd have to wait and try to find the prince. Prince Charles would remember her, and then everything would fall into place. Or you could focus on creating a new life for yourself and Bruno, she reminded herself. Not some fantasy you've made up for yourself after one night dancing with a man you just met. She curtsied stiffly. I apologize, Your Grace. Quite so, quite so. The Duke removed his hat, fanning himself with it. When he spoke next, he sounded almost apologetic. I have had a long day, young lady. Do not pester me further with such bizarre inquiries. He waited for her to nod before going on. Normally, such undignified questions posed to your supervisor would be most unwelcome, but curiosity happens to be a trait I need in you. Cinderella must have looked confused, for he replied, All will be explained as necessary. He stopped in front of a gilded door so tall it touched the ceiling. Cinderella only now realized they had left the servants' quarters. The carpets had turned rich, a rich, deep burgundy embellished with silver tassels. The vaulted ceilings were painted with historic scenes of Eurale's first kings and queens, and the doors were furnished with gold-plated knobs. "Welcome back, Your Grace." The guard on the right opened the door, and the Duke strode inside his office. "Quickly, child," said the Duke. "I'm a busy man, and I have many matters of state to attend to this morning." Cinderella hurried inside, standing awkwardly in front of the Duke's desk, and posing portraits of him stared from every direction, with the odd effect of making his real self seem small. "Now, Duchess Genevieve is the king's sister, and you have been tasked with the very important role of serving her." The Duke looked off to the side, making sure the door was closed. He lowered his voice. "I'd like you to keep an eye on her. Report to me everything about the Duchess, what she eats for breakfast, what she says and does with her day. Everything." Cinderella fought to keep her features expressionless. "Why?" she wanted to ask. "I will be away today in search of the missing maiden with the glass slipper, but I shall anticipate your report when I return. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Splendid. Now off you go." He rang one of the bells on his desk, and within seconds an attendant attired in a sleek velvet coat and a wig of white curls sprang into the room. "Have my carriage readied," commanded the Duke, "and see to it that this young lady is dispatched to her Highness's quarters." The Duke's attendant cast Cinderella a sidelong glance, one that plainly showed he did not envy her position. After a quick look up and down at her appearance, he sniffed just as Madame Ermina had, even if he didn't think she would last long here. Cinderella's stomach sank. Somehow, she'd have to prove them all wrong. Chapter 9. The palace was a labyrinth of hallways, but the Duke's attendant did not deign to give Cinderella a tour. For her part, she was so focused on trying to keep up that she almost didn't notice when they arrived in front of the Duchess's chambers. "She'll be expecting you," was all her guide said before he swiftly deserted her. "Wait, do I—" The Duke's attendant had already turned the corner. Knock. Cinderella whirled to face the Duchess's massive doors, both side flanked by unsmiling guards. "Do you suppose I go inside?" she asked them. No response. "Report to me everything about the Duchess," the Grand Duke had instructed. Cinderella bit her lip. That didn't strike her as a typical task given to royal attendants. Gathering her courage, she took the gilded knocker and tapped softly. Then she clasped the knob and turned, entering the Duchess's apartments as quietly as she could. "That was fast," rasped a voice, startling Cinderella. "I take it you're my next victim?" Before her, the Duchess of Orléans sat at her writing desk, a coil of salt and pepper hair gathered at her nape, punctuated by emerald and amethyst hairpins that matched her violet gown and its green trimming. Her face didn't seem to match the refinery of her garments. It was like a quill, long and narrow, with gray eyes as sharp as polished nibs. "I'm sorry, Your Grace," Cinderella said, bowing. "I am sorry, Your Highness," corrected the Duchess. "I'm a member of the royal family, unlike Ferdinand." She snapped her book closed and harumphed. "They send me a girl who doesn't even know how to address me properly. How like George. How absent-minded." Venturing deeper into the sitting room, Cinderella was about to repeat her apology when the Duchess grabbed the walking stick beside her desk and rose. "Stay off the rug," the king's sister barked. She wrinkled her nose at Cinderella, her sharp eyes taking in the cuts on her hands, the bruises on her temples, hidden under her ill-fitting wig. "You smell dirty. Have you been out in the rain?" Heat rushed to Cinderella's cheeks. "There was a storm last night, Your Highness, and I only—" "Stop." The Duchess raised a gloved hand. "I don't want to hear any more. You are dismissed." Cinderella bit her lip to keep it from trembling. Madame Ermina had warned her that she wouldn't last in the palace. But even she must have expected her to last more than 5 minutes. "On your way out, you may tell whoever thought you fit to attend me to turn in their resignation as well." "But, Your Highness—" "Out, I said. Can you not hear?" The Duchess reached towards the nearest table, picking up a silver call bell and muttering, Wait until I get my hands on George. Does he think this is some sort of practical joke? How dare his staff send me a servant who—" "Oh, you mustn't blame Madame Ermina," Cinderella cried. "What was that?" She drew a breath. It wasn't her fault or the king's. The Duchess clamped the bell in her palm, suffocating its clang. "Of course it wasn't my brother's fault. Do you think he has time to oversee the hiring of servants? Ferdinand manages the royal retainers." "Please don't dismiss anyone because of me," Cinderella said quietly. "I'll leave now so Madame Ermina can send you a new girl right away." She gave a despondent curtsy, then turned for the door. "Wait. I've changed my mind." The Duchess pounded her walking stick on the ground, a cue Cinderella did not understand. "Well, don't be a mouse. Come here and let me take a look at you." Trying to hide her confusion and careful to avoid stepping on the carpets, Cinderella traced back toward the Duchess. Said the king's sister, considering. "Your dress is a size too large, and your wig impossible. It's practically slipping off your head." The Duchess let out a sigh. "I suppose your smell isn't that offensive. See to it that you bathe tonight. Thoroughly. Is that clear?" "Oh, yes, ma'am." "Shush! I am not finished. I should be insulted that my attendant has little experience in the palace, but I suppose it would be Ferdinand's way to find yet more petty ways to slight me." Duchess Genevieve glowered at her. "He sent you specifically to insult me, didn't he? Well, I will not give him the satisfaction of sending you back." The Duchess circled Cinderella, studying her with a frown. "You're a rather pretty girl, aren't you? Bright-eyed, cheery, and earnest-looking. Clearly an inexperienced member of the royal household. Don't expect that to make me like you more. Don't expect that to make me trust you, either. But it appears I don't have a choice but to keep you, do I? Lunch is in an hour, and I need assistance dressing for the occasion." Her thin brows knit together skeptically. "You do know how to dress a lady, don't you?" "Heavens, judging by your own outfit, I'm not sure I want to know the answer to that question." Cinderella hesitated. She had fitted her stepsisters into their fine clothes plenty of times, but a duchess's gowns would be far more elegant and elaborate than anything Drusilla or Anastasia ever wore. "I don't know, ma'am," she replied truthfully. "Don't know? I have never served a duchess before." "You don't say," said the king's sister with a scoff. "You had better learn quickly, otherwise you will not be staying past lunch." "Yes, ma'am." "Unless I address you, you are a statue," continued the Duchess, taking on an instructional tone. "All servants of the palace are to be invisible, not to be seen, heard, or even noticed. Hear me. I do not intend on being made an embarrassment of in my brother's court." "I understand." "Good." The Duchess harumphed again, then strode into her bedchamber to retrieve the fur stole draped over the chair. "What do you think of this?" "That?" Cinderella stared at the stole and tried not to wrinkle her nose. She might not be knowledgeable about the latest fashions at court, but it didn't take much of an eye to tell it was the most hideous thing she'd ever seen. "Out with it, girl." "If I may be honest, Your Highness, it is not very flattering on you. I would suggest a simple cape, perhaps an emerald green to match the trimming on your gown instead." Duchess Genevieve's thin lips curved in surprise. "It isn't, is it? Funny that Lady Alarna should say it suits me perfectly. Yet that's the thing with my brother's court. Everyone says what you want to hear." She tossed the stole onto her bed and cast a glance at the clock. "We'll need an entirely new ensemble then. If that makes me late for lunch, so be it. My brother can wait. Women are always waiting on men. Let it be the other way around for a change." Cinderella tilted her head, surprised that the Duchess should act so impertinent toward the king, but she didn't question it. "Yes, ma'am." "I should have at least 3 girls waiting on me," the Duchess said testily as Cinderella helped her select a new outfit. "Short on staff indeed." She fluttered her handkerchief at the swarms of maids outside the window skittering across the royal lawn. What do you think they're all doing?" Cinderella wasn't sure whether she was supposed to answer. "They're on their way inside, ma'am, to do the dusting and polishing and sweeping and heaven knows what else," the Duchess interrupted. "The chandeliers don't need to be cleaned twice a day, and the windows certainly don't need to be wiped every hour." Her gaze swept across her chambers, and she crossed her arms. "My desk could use a better dusting, though." "You missed a button, girl." Cinderella bit her lower lip. It wasn't like her to be so careless. After years of working under her stepmother's careful scrutiny, she had learned to be quick yet efficient. Her nerves were failing her. "Enough," the Duchess said. "I can finish the rest myself. Go away." Cinderella blinked. "Pardon? What don't you understand, girl?" the king's sister huffed. "I'm off to lunch, and I do not want some grubby young girl I barely met scrounging around my chambers, so be off. And I don't mean wandering off for the rest of the day. I can barely stand longer than an hour's lunch with George, and I have a perfect internal clock. If you are not back before I'm finished, I will have no choice but to send you back for good." Relief flooded Cinderella's chest. "I see. Yes, ma'am. And if anyone asks whose attendant you are not mine." "Understood, ma'am." Cinderella had no idea where to go. An hour wasn't long enough to explore the castle with its maze of hallways, anterooms, and courts. Deciding it was best not to wander too far, she made her way around the Duchess's wing and stopped before a long hall that housed a gallery of portraits. To her immediate left was a portrait of the king and Duchess's children. Genevieve carried her baby brother in her arms. A half smile perched on her lips as George tugged on her sleeve. In another painting, the two were slightly older, riding the same pony in front of a fountain in the royal gardens. The Duchess had a mischievous glint in her eye, and a wide grin Cinderella couldn't imagine the stern lady wearing now. Seeing the Duchess as a girl of 5 or 6 made Cinderella smile. They looked close, the king and his sister. I wonder what changed. With a sigh, she progressed down the hall, observing the kings growing older with each painting she passed. In the middle of the gallery, a regal young woman appeared by King George's side. The Queen. Whoever had painted her had captured the intensity of her gaze, for it was so arresting that when Cinderella stopped to get a closer look, she almost curtsied before the portrait. She leaned toward the painting, studying the Queen. Her hair was raven black like her son, the prince's. Her eyes dark yet luminous. "Back from your morning ride, your highness?" Cinderella threw a glance behind her, and her heart nearly stopped. At the other end of the hall was the prince. A deep frown beset his face as he strode down the hall, looking harried. His attendant practically had to run to keep up with him. "Do I bow?" she wondered frantically. She needed to make a decision before he passed her. Hastily, she bent into a curtsy. She knew she was not to peek up and glance at him, not to say a single word unless addressed or spoken to, but she couldn't help it. She looked up. Seeing him again, a wash of memories overwhelmed her. How wonderful it had been to dance for the first time in years. When she closed her eyes, she could still remember the smell of the ballroom, a potpourri of perfumes from the hundreds of guests, with the faintest hint of lemon from the shining floors. She could feel the soft ruby carpet under her heels and hear the lush waltz music echoing up to the high ceilings of the ballroom. And how kind he had been to her. Not a trace of the arrogance she would have expected from the royal heir to the kingdom. She supposed that's why she hadn't even known he was the prince. And their kiss. Simply remembering it made Cinderella's face warm. "Your Highness," she almost said, but she stopped herself. "Your Highness what? Your Highness, I'm the runaway princess, only I'm not really a princess, I'm just Cinderella." She bit her tongue. She couldn't do it. Why not? She stared after him as he passed her, not sure if she knew the answer. The prince wasn't dressed in formal attire, but in a navy suit with a thin cord of silver, trimming the sleeves and collar. No medals adorned his jacket, and no epaulets sat on his shoulders. Yet Cinderella found she liked him even more like this, with a smudge of dirt on the cuff of his sleeve and a stray piece of hay clinging on the side of his pants. How much he looked simply like a young man she might have met in town. She could have almost forgotten he was a prince. Almost. Prince Charles was nearly at the end of the corridor when he suddenly stopped. He turned and retraced his steps until he stood in front of her. Cinderella held her breath, her pulse hammering in her ears. He smiled at her, and something flickered across his dark eyes. A spark of recognition. Cinderella's heart lifted. "You," he said quietly. He gestured at her lavender sash. "You must be Aunt Genevieve's new attendant." Cinderella blinked. Sure, she had misheard, but the prince kept speaking. "Welcome. My aunt is very dear to me, and I would be most grateful if you saw to it that she's comfortable here." Cinderella's lips parted with disappointment. Struggling to find the words, she curtsied again. Before she could utter anything at all, the Prince Charles wished her well and was gone. "Yes, your highness," she whispered, watching him disappear down the hall. Slowly, as her heart sank, a terrible ache rose in her throat. She had been sure he would recognize her. Was it the wig? Why didn't I take it off? Why didn't I say anything? She inhaled, trying to ease away the sadness swelling inside her. Even with the wig, she thought he would have known her. Maybe it hadn't been love after all. Maybe he was only searching for her because his father wanted him to get married. What does it matter? She admonished herself. This is the chance of happiness I've always wanted. I'm free of my stepmother, and I have a new life in the palace. It'd be silly to risk losing that new life and throw my heart away on a boy, prince or not, that I don't even know. I'm not going to look for him again, she decided, pushing all thoughts of Prince Charles aside. She needed her work at the Duchess's attendant more than she needed a prince. She'd pour all her energy toward her position in the palace. Then she'd make new dreams for herself, dreams like seeing more of the world and helping others, like her fairy godmother. She frowned, murmuring to herself, "The next time I see her, I'll have to ask what she meant by her magic being forbidden here." But she had no idea when she'd see Lenore again. She couldn't summon her fairy godmother while she was working in the palace, not after what she had said, or hadn't said, about the ban on magic. Certainly not with the Grand Duke constantly lurking about, waiting on her for reports. His portrait stared at Cinderella from the wall, and a wave of dread rushed over her. In her first hour serving Duchess Genevieve, she'd done nothing but help the king's sister dress for lunch. What exactly was the Duke expecting her to report to him? What her fashion tastes were? What flavor of tea she liked to drink? Cinderella hoped she wouldn't have to find out. I'm going to go ahead and stop here on chapter 10, and I will start that one later. I hope you guys have enjoyed all this so far, and I'm just going to say good night, and I will catch you guys next time. Thanks for listening. Bye.